You should never achieve a big goal without having other goals lined up behind it. Happiness doesn't come from the goals. You need the goals to create that burning desire. You need the goals to create the hunger, but happiness comes from progress and growth. You've got to be progressing.
Hey, Rod, thanks for joining the podcast. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me on, Ladney. I'm really looking forward to this. Let's have some fun.
Absolutely. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you've got a story that's very interesting. There was a time you had $50 million that you lost after 2008, and you've made it back. That's all I need to say. I want to hear this story.
Well, so I'm going to go way back because it'll lend some framework to this conversation. So I'm a Dutch immigrant, think wooden shoes and windmills. Immigrated this country when I was 6 years old with my brother Albert, my mother's Vansha. We ended up in Denver, Colorado, and we didn't have much growing up. In fact, my mom babysat kids so we'd have enough money to eat, and we ate at an expired food. I shopped at an expired food store, believe it or not. They had that back then, and we, drank powdered milk with our cereal in the morning because it was cheaper than real milk. And trust me, it sounds better than it is. And I wore clothes from the Goodwill and the Salvation Army all the way through junior high school until I was 14. I was tall for my age and lied and said I was 15 so I could get a job flipping burgers to buy my own clothes. And I'm sure you've got listeners that had it harder than I did, but maybe even have it harder now with the economy the way it is, but interest rates where they are. But I knew I wanted more. And like I said, my mom babysat kids, and with her babysitting money, she was a bit of an entrepreneur. So she invested in the stock market successfully, but she also invested in real estate. Her first real estate acquisition was the house right across the street from us when I was 14. She paid about 30 grand. And then when I was 17, she told me she'd made $20,000 in her sleep, that it had gone up 20,000. And I was like, what? You made 20 grand and you didn't do anything? Screw college. I'm getting into real estate. I went out and got my real estate broker's license right when I turned 18. Back then you could do it with education. Now they got smart. You need some experience before you can have your own office and be a broker. But I actually was a broker right when I turned 18 in Denver. And I was smart enough to go work for a broker. In fact, I was dating the broker's daughter, which ties into the story a little bit. My first year in real estate, I made about 8 grand. My second year, maybe 10 grand. But my third year, I made over $100,000, which back in 1980 was some pretty decent change. So what happened between year 2 and year 3 that caused me to 10x my income? Well, what happened was I met this guy, this broker I was working for, and he taught me about the importance of mindset and psychology. How really 80 to 90% of your success in anything is your mindset and psychology. And, fast forward to today, I've owned over 2,000 houses that I've rented long-term. I own thousands of apartments. I'm actually buying senior housing as well now. In 2006, my net worth went up $17 million while I slept. And you might say, wow. And I said, wow. And I got a head so big, I could barely fit it through a door. I thought I was a real estate god. And when that happens, God or the universe or whatever, give you a nice little beat down. And that was 2008 and 9. I conservatively lost $50 million in 2008 and 9. And so what I'm known for talking about, on my podcast, I'm blessed to host a very large real estate podcast as well. And I'm known for talking about the mindset it took to have 50 million to lose in the first place. And then maybe more importantly, the mindset it took to recover from losing $50 million. So, happy to drill down on that some if you'd like.
No, we'd love to hear about it. Lifetime Cash Flow Podcast, one of the top ones out there. In fact, top commercial podcasts out there. Appreciate you coming on. Yeah, I want to hear about this. And by the way, when you said you gained 17 million overnight, what kind of vehicle was all this real estate in?
It was 800 houses and several apartment complexes. I had so many LLCs, it was ridiculous. Now I predate LLCs, just so you know. I remember when LLCs weren't around. It was just limited partnerships and corporations, S corps.
Could you have sold that all at one time? Like you see a lot of times.
I tried to sell the whole portfolio and was unable. In fact, I marked it down to 30. By the way, I only owed 30 cents on the dollar. And I still crashed and burned. That's how bad it was. Single family just doesn't cash flow like multifamily, which is what I teach multifamily. I'll brag for a minute. My warriors, my coaching students now own upwards of 300,000 units. We're counting and we're over 275,000. I know we're missing a bunch. So I think it's closer to 300,000 that they own under my tutelage, something I'm very proud of. But, I started teaching, if you're going to buy and hold real estate, for God's sakes, do multifamily. And I say, ask me how I know. And because it was the houses that pulled me down. In fact, we even get t-shirts away at my live events say hashtag ask me how I know, because I say, don't do that. Ask me how I know. And one of my students got me the shirt that said hashtag ask me how I know. This is a joke. But anyway.
I'm sure people ask you about that, don't they? When you have a shirt like that. We actually have some pretty fun merch. We got a shirt that says always settle and you need closure. And I'll tell you, we've had a lot of real estate agents close deals because of those shirts.
No, that's good. Yeah, no, we give them away. But, like I say, I'm known for talking about the mindset it took to have that big of a portfolio to begin with. And then really what it took, maybe even more importantly, what it took to recover from that. I mean, people killed themselves for less than that back in the 08-09 crash. And let me mention that for a minute. Never let your vehicle be your identity.
Mhm.
Okay. That's when people take their own lives when their vehicle crashes. But if it's your identity, it's who you are. Like, I don't know if you heard about that guy that was shot himself in his Lambo from a crypto failure. Oh, it's been a few months now, but that's when someone identifies with their vehicle. So be very
Sure.
careful with that. I call it a seminar when it's a failure. It was a big freaking seminar, $50 million seminar, but I've built 29 businesses so far in my career, several worth tens of millions of dollars, two right now are, but most were spectacular flaming seminars. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, right.
Because we fail our way to success. So don't fear that, but make sure again that you don't identify with your vehicle. And there's such incredible opportunity right now in multifamily real estate. There are a lot of operators in trouble. There's incredible opportunity in senior housing. There's 10,000 people a day turning 65 in this country. I'm one of them. I turned 65 in January. I turned 66 in a couple of weeks. And so there's incredible opportunity there. And a lot of those people want to retire and sell their businesses. Incredible opportunity to buy businesses. There's a lot of opportunity coming, but there's also a lot of upset coming. I don't know if you've heard Elon Musk's latest interview on Joe Rogan, but it's pretty sobering. And he talks about anybody that works basically on a computer, pretty much their jobs are going to be gone in 2 or 3 years from AI. And so if you're listening to this podcast and that's you, I don't want to scare you. Maybe you're in the IT field. I would just tell you to think about how you reinvent yourself. Think about what other, start a side hustle immediately. Don't wait for the shoe to drop. The big companies have been laying off people already. Amazon and Meta, they're way ahead of it because they're already building the AI, but it's coming to the mainstream. And so, there's going to be a lot of upset, but there's also a lot of opportunity.
Sure. Let's go through the actual situation. So 2008 is occurring. You kind of see what's happening, right? And you're like, oh, crap. And how did you deal with that?
Oh, it was like a light switch, buddy. I mean, it was literally like a freaking light switch. It was 1 minute things were great, the next minute. I mean, when what was it? Lehman Brothers collapsed. I
Yep.
mean, you couldn't borrow money to save your life at that point. You couldn't sell anything to save your life at that
Yep.
point. I tried to discount my portfolio down to 30%, couldn't sell it. Basically my debt. And so, I mean, it sucked. I hid under a rock for a few months, with my eyeball poking out. And then but then I did what I teach people to do just to get started, as I reassociated with my goals. And that's the first thing you have to do is you've got to get very clear on what it is you want and why you want it, because you've got to create a hunger to get, for me to crawl out from under that rock. But, if you're sitting here listening and, maybe you're struggling right now because of where the market's at and you know that you need to consider a side hustle, do something else. It starts with your goals. And I do a goal setting workshop. It's on my link tree. I'll share that with you real quick. It's rodslinks.com, rods plural, links plural.com. Or if you're driving, text links to 72345. And at the bottom of that link tree is my goal setting workshop. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. There's a guide you can download. You give me an hour and I promise you'll leave motivated coming out of your skin. It's about how long it takes. Here's the problem. People spend more time planning a freaking Christmas party than they do designing their lives. And doing your goals is designing your life. It starts with goals because that's how you push through the fear and the limiting beliefs is with the goals. A lot of people are comfortable, and maybe that's you if you're listening. And the comfort zone's a nice warm place. And we also know nothing freaking grows there, right? Anyway, so it starts with goals. And then you got to make a decision. And that's what I did. I mean, I reassociated with my goals back then. And then I just said, okay, enough of this, enough feeling sorry for yourself, get your ass up and go make something happen. And, if you're listening, maybe you need to make a decision to, maybe you don't have the freedom that you want, the financial freedom, the time freedom, the freedom with your family. And you've got to make a decision to push yourself and maybe grind for a few years like most people won't. So you can live the rest of your life like most people can't. And that's the truth of it. Once you've made that decision, then you're committed. If you're just interested in doing so, and I'm not talking about dipping your toe in the water with something. I'm talking about 1 foot. I'm not talking about 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I mean, you decide it's done. And then you're like a train on a track. If you're just interested, you're going to get knocked off track. See, motivation will get you started. But once you make a decision and commit, that's what's going to bring you home. So that's what I decided. Okay, no more pity party. I built a company out of the ashes of all that. And it turned into a $10 million company that ultimately sold. But the next piece is you got to take the first step too. You make a decision, but then you actually got to have some movement. Dr. Martin Luther King said, you take that first step in faith, the next step will be revealed. I get a lot of students that are analytical. And listen, if that's you and you're listening, listen, I love you and you're some of the most successful people in my business and in my coaching business. But I also know how you have to check off every checkbox before you make a move. And you know who you are. And I love you and it's all good, but you've got to recognize that sometimes you can't see the whole pathway, but you've still got to take action. You've got to make a decision. You've got to take that first step. I see it with my students sometimes. We call it the law of the first deal. It's the scariest. It takes the longest. It's the most stressful. successful. The next they get one. Next thing I know, they had three. I'm like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah,
Right?
right.
They realize it's all between their ears. You got to take that step. And I'll give you an analogy. If you're analytical and you struggle with this, just remember you can drive all the way across the United States at night with your headlight only seeing 50 feet in front of you. Now you know you can make it. You know other people have done it before you. You might have some obstacles. Yeah, you might have some obstacles, but you know it can be done. It's the same way with any new endeavor you take, but you got to take that first step.
You learned something from the initial pain you went through, which was multifamily. You want to be in that space versus managing hundreds of properties individually, right? How'd you get started on that? I mean, how'd you get started in the multifamily? There was money available to borrow at that time? What did that first deal look like?
I bought them by myself, even as big as an 88 unit. I bought with my brother, but now we syndicate. We pool money together and syndicate deals, and that's my students have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, me as well. But initially we did it with we'd sell a few houses and we'd have the cash to buy a property. And yeah, there was bank financing back then. I didn't syndicate back then; it was with banks. But then when I look back, to save 50 basis points, a 0.5% interest, I'd refinance packages of houses with my multifamily. So when it imploded, I lost everything. I thought I was brilliant. I still have that multifamily. That's the other thing. Again, it was the houses that pulled me down. My multifamily pulled back about 11%, but it would have survived that crash if I hadn't cross collateralized it. And that's how I lost the whole portfolio. So yeah, that's what happened there. There's going to be a lot of fear. There's already a lot of fear in the marketplace right now. Like I say, these rates aren't coming down fast enough. And the thing I want to remind everybody of is everybody has fear. So what is fear? Everything and run. That's what a lot of people think it is. I like to think it's false evidence appearing real. I think that's more realistic. But the metaphor I like better is face everything and rise, because the most successful people on the planet feel fear. I mean, we achievers, we call it stress, but it's fear. But they push through in spite of it. And recognize that whenever I'm stressed or fearful, even if it's 3:00 in the morning, I'll get up and I'll do something, because any action you take mitigates fear. But another thing is limiting beliefs. A lot of people have these limiting beliefs as well that prevent them from taking any action. Like, I'll give you an example, a personal example for me. So when I immigrated to this country, I didn't speak English, and I got thrown into school, and I found out what bullies were for the first time. So I got my butt kicked occasionally. I hadn't learned how to fight back yet. And then my mom, proud Dutch woman that she was, thought it'd be a great idea to send me to school in wooden shoes, true story, and leather shorts the Germans wear for Oktoberfest, which was like freaking crack cocaine for the bullies. So I got my ass kicked.
Right.
And then the bullies had chased me home, and she chased them off with a fly swatter, true story. And of course, next day, ass beaten. And I came up with this belief system that I wasn't good enough. And I used to ask myself, how can I show them I'm good enough? Now, see, a lot of people have these limiting beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not courageous enough. I'm not old enough, young enough, whatever. And the thing to remember is that these belief systems typically have no basis in fact, but we believe they're real. And so they impact, every area of our lives. And there's a reason the acronym for belief systems is BS, because 99% of them are BS. But again, we believe they're real. And so, if you're consciously aware of one of these, sometimes you're not consciously aware, but if you're consciously aware, drag it out into the daylight. I used to be afraid to raise my hand in front of 10 kids in a classroom, and now I speak literally in front of thousands of people a year, typically with flip-flops on. The next thing I want to talk about is focus. Like I say, I'm blessed to host pretty much the largest real estate podcast out there for commercial real estate. I'm at almost 30 million downloads, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in our space, it's pretty good. I listen to 2 podcasts. That's the reason I bring it up. One of them is Joe Rogan that I mentioned. Definitely want to listen to Elon Musk interview there, the latest one. And the other one is Tim Ferriss, because I try to keep both sides of the aisle. I'm definitely on one side, but on the other side, Tim Ferriss interviews the best of the best in the world. And I try to keep some balance, which is why I do that. But he interviews the best actors like Ed Norton, Hugh Jackman, Arnold, Jamie Foxx, best athletes in the world like Michael Phelps, the swimmer, NFL, NBA players, billionaires like Ray Dalio, heads of the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world like Zuckerberg. And what he does is he deconstructs their success. It's a fascinating conversation. The reason I bring all this up is the most successful people on the planet have the highest degree of focus. I mean, look at people like Elon and Bezos, and that whatever you focus on grows larger, both positive or negative. But I'll get people to call me and say, how do I get out of student loan debt? And I'm like, wrong question. How do you make so much money that debt's irrelevant is the right question, because what you focus on is what you get. For example, they asked Mother Teresa if she was anti-war, and she said, no, I'm pro-peace. I mean, you see what I'm saying here. Focus is important. And I was listening listening to Tim Ferriss's show, Best of the Best in the World. And I did an analysis, and 85% of his audience meditates, which enhances what? Your focus, right? So just keep that in mind. Focus is power, and so very, very important. The last piece is playing to your strengths. A lot of people tell you to build your weaknesses, but I'm going to tell you that's a mistake. Your strengths are your greatest assets. You're going to get success much faster if you play to your strengths than you hire, align, or partner for your weaknesses, especially in my business, for example, because it does involve analysis. So it's empirical. Buying commercial real estate is primarily numbers. You get the numbers right, you ask all the right questions. It's pretty hard to make a big mistake. So you need somebody analytical, but you also need somebody outgoing because there's a lot of relationships building. And so some of the best partnerships I see in my business, like in my Warrior coaching program, is an analytical person that's introverted with an outgoing person that's extroverted. But you want to play to your strengths. Your strengths are your greatest assets. And here's why. When you play to your strengths, first of all, you love what you do, and because you're good at it. And so you never really work another day in your life because you're playing in your strengths. But also you're going to be passionate, and passion's required to influence people. And you need to influence people in this business, really in any business. And you need passion to influence investors and brokers to work with you and sellers to work with you and so on and so forth. And if you love what you do, that's so much easier. So one more piece.
Yeah.
And that is who you hang out with is who you become. You know that. Everybody knows that. You show me your 3 best friends. I'll show you who you are in every aspect of your life, your health, your happiness, your relationships, definitely your finances. Here's the problem. People default to people they work with very often or people they went to school with. And sometimes those people have their own limiting beliefs or fears. Fear of losing you, fear of feeling less than if you succeed. And sometimes it's family. I want to tell you, love your family, but proactively choose your peers. I remember when I was losing everything in 2008, I was in Tony Robbins' Platinum Partnership. It was like about 60, 70 people in there. And there were people in there that were killing it. Okay. They were killing it in the crash. It was like 130 grand back then. It's a lot more than that now. But I was around people that were thriving. I don't know if they just got lucky or if they planned, but they're like, get up, you puss, 50 million, schmillion, go make something happen. That's who you want to be around when you're building this thing. And like I say, that's why a program like my coaching program is so successful. So, get out there and get around people that want more. Go to meetup groups, get around people that will hold you accountable, that'll lift you up and praise you and validate you rather than, the naysayers. Super, super important.
Yeah. Tell me about the structure of your coaching program. How does that look like?
Basically, it's one-on-one coaching. It's soup to nuts. If someone's interested in applying to my program, what you do is you text the word crush to 72345. Because I'm very proud of it. My program literally eclipses everybody else combined. Literally, our results are more than anybody else in the business combined. And there's some big names in the business that you'd recognize. We're doing all sorts of asset classes as well. I have tons of senior housing in the program, myself included, self-storage, thousands of self-storage units, industrial flex space, mobile home parks, student housing, you name it. I mean, every asset class there's a ton of it in there besides just multifamily. But if you're listening, that's what you want to get around. You want to get around people that are doing this, and just be careful who you allow to influence you. So just want to mention that. So you mentioned my foundation. Let me tell you a quick story and we can land the plane with this. So when I immigrated, I ended up in Denver, Colorado, but I knew I wanted to live on the beach. I would visualize that sand and that surf and that beach. And 20 years later, I built what's now probably about a $10 million mansion on the beach. It was called a Gulf to Bay. I owned the beach on one side and had my boats on the backside. It was a slice through an island. And it's kind of funny because it's literally right across from where I live right now. I can see my old place out in my backyard. God's got a sense of humor. I lost that in the crash. But to describe this place, I had a giant waterfall from the second floor balcony into the pool. You had to walk through the pool or through the waterfall to get to the pool. The pool was in magazines. It was beautiful. Big spiral staircase up through the middle. I had a wine cellar elevator. On the second floor, I had aquariums built around the staircase. Cost me almost $200,000. So this gives you an idea of the house.
Yeah.
I'd worked for this thing for 20 years. That's how long, I manifested. It took me to manifest this thing. 2 months after I moved in, I'm floating in the pool at night. Pool's changing colors. It's got fiber optic lighting. And I'm looking up at this testament to my ego. It was to prove to the freaking world I was good enough. And I got depressed. And I don't mean a little depressed. I got really depressed. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I've just achieved success like times 10,000. Well, when I look back on it, Latani, I realized there were 3 things happening.
Yeah.
One was you should never achieve a big goal without having other goals lined up behind it. Like the good book says, without a vision, the people perish. I didn't have a vision for the future. I didn't know what I was going to do next. The next piece was, that was the first thing. Second thing is happiness doesn't come from the goals. You need the goals to create that burning desire. But they say the happiest days of a boat owner's life, the day they buy it and the day they sell it, right? You need the goals to create the hunger, but happiness comes from progress and growth. You've got to be progressing. The third piece, and the reason I bring all this up, is I was totally focused on me. Rod, show the world I matter, show the world I'm good enough, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's the year I went and saw Tony Robbins, who I highly recommend for anybody to go see. And I found that he fed families for the holidays. And I was like, what a concept. Do something for someone else. I'm embarrassed to say I had to be 40 to get that memo. But I called my brother in Denver. This is 25 years ago. And I said, bro, let's feed 5 families, because I was going to go visit him for Thanksgiving. And so he called his church, found 5 families who really needed help. And we bought food and toys for their kids if they had them, frozen turkeys and all that. And the third family changed my life. We go up to this house, and as a Hispanic woman in this shack, it wasn't even a 1-bedroom. It was a shack with 5 kids. And she comes out and she sees all this stuff on the porch, the food and the toys, and she starts crying. Her kids come out, 2 of the older ones start crying. I start crying, and I was hooked. And please know this is not ego, what I'm going to share with you now. There's a real message in this. In the last 25 years, I've fed over 150,000 children here in my area for the holidays. I've provided tens of thousands of backpacks filled with school supplies to local kids that don't have the basic supplies for school. Done thousands and thousands of teddy bears to local police departments for their officers to keep in their vehicles if they encounter a child that's been in a traumatic situation. Now, Tony Robbins calls it the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. Achievement's a science. If you want to learn how to do commercial real estate, get your butt to my boot camp. I've got a virtual one coming up. By the way, it's on my link tree there as well at Rod's Links if you want to come learn this business. I don't sell anything at these events. It's 2 days of training, nothing being sold. So there's no excuse. You can come for $47. That's a science. But I'll give you the blueprint. Achievement's a science. You just got to go do it. I'll give you the blueprint and you just got to do it. But fulfillment is an art. The science of achievement, art of fulfillment. You got to figure out what juices you and give back to that in some fashion. For me, it's kids. Maybe for you, it's the environment. Maybe it's animals. Maybe it's the elderly. Whatever it is, give back now. Don't say, well, you had money, that's why you gave back. No, you want the money? Give back. That's how God works. It comes back to you tenfold, 100-fold, 1,000-fold. That's how you're fulfilled. Now, I've had people here at my studio, at my compound here, with thousands and thousands of units, and I can tell if they're like I was before that epiphany, and I feel sorry for them because they're truly not fulfilled. They're not truly happy. They may be financially successful, but they're not.
No, that's good. You hear it a lot from very successful people. And look, at the end of the day, what happens to you when you're a kid shapes a lot of your life, right? You talked about feeling like you wanted to prove that you should fit in or whatever it was. And I'm assuming that came from those early days of being bullying, right? All this stuff matters. And that program where you're feeding those people, that's called Tiny Hands. Is that right?
It's called the Tiny Hands Foundation. Yeah. I paid for it up until 2008. I mean, 2008, I fed 1,500, 3,500 people, 3,500 kids. But then, the world collapsed. And so I started taking donations. But every dime goes to food and backpacks and teddy bears and then some because I feed it a lot too. But anyway, yeah. So that's the Tiny Hands Foundation. Thank you for allowing me to do a shout out.
Absolutely, Rod. Rod, you got a great story, man. I mean, you started with nothing, you built something great, you lost it, you've done it again. Tell me about Tony Robbins. Do you go to his stuff a lot?
Tony's fantastic. I followed him around the planet for 23 years. I was on his team for 8 years, and I had to give it up when I had a bad car accident because you got to stand a lot when you're helping him, and I couldn't really stand for a long time anymore. But yeah, no, he's amazing. Impacted every area of my life. I would say he's my greatest mentor for sure.
We really appreciate. Thanks for coming on, telling your
Yeah,
story.
thanks,
It's an
brother.
amazing story.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.